Welcome, welcome, welcome! Denis Labrecque here, and you might be glad to know that this will be our last tutorial, Series 7, before we go to the creation of our webpage next. So this is about presentational HTML tags, and be aware that I'm using presentational as a rather catch-all title, because in reality I'm using semantic and presentational tags, and HTML5 tries to remove presentational tags in the favor of CSS, and tries to enforce semantic tags, which means that when HTML is not caring for the presentation of how the document will look anymore, but it's rather caring for how the document, for the information that the document contains, as for search engines. So, this is an example of a presentational element that used to exist, which is called bold. And you see my definitions here. This inline element indicates that the enclosed text should be displayed in boldface. But it's discouraged, and we should rather use strong. So just let me demonstrate here. All of the tags I'm going to show you are in this document and will look as such. For example, bold. And this would be how bold looks like by default. No style sheet here. And the way you use all these tags is by enclosing the text you want to be bold or italicized or whatever inside this element. So for example, this element is B, and it stands for bold, and important text is rendered as bold inside a document. So bold is replaced today by strong, which means strong emphasis. And you'll see HTML5 go through weird definitions like that and kind of stretches of the mind to try to remove the presentational definitions of tags and rather use the semantic definitions, which means that they actually contain information. And so that's the only reason why HTML5 will keep these tags. So you're encouraged to use strong instead, and that'll give the same result, as you can see with my webpage where I used strong here. Italics is again deprecated, or anyway, almost deprecated, and because it's again a presentational element, we would prefer to use EM for emphasis. So remark that here we have strong, which is strong emphasis, and emphasis. So the first emphasis will be italicized, and the next level of very high emphasis will be strong, which is bold. And sometimes when readers automatically read a web page, they'll be able to distinguish between these and automatically apply a different pitch or a different strength, vocal strength, because of these semantic elements. Mark is marked text, such as when you highlight a document. And if I show you, this is how it looks over here. So we next have small, and oddly enough, we used to have a big too, I believe. Yeah, big. We used to have big in HTML, but big has been removed. However, small has remained in HTML5 because small would be useful as fine print. Side comments are small print text, as in legal information. So that's the only reason why you should use it. And as you'll see, oh, I actually forgot to put it in. So here we go. And there we are. This is how fine print looks. So it's not very complicated to understand, but of course, I know that I'm shooting many tags at you, and I don't expect you to know them all on first glance. Obviously, that's not how I learned either, but you'll have to use them, and I'm presenting all these to you so that you be aware of their existence, basically. So you have subscript, and superscript. I'm having a hard time to pronounce right now. And these are, oh, I forgot an end tag here. And these elements render as subscript or superscript text. So you'll see here an example, and I was going to say they're often used in equations, and I already wrote it. Now notice that one potential thing that is bothersome is that the line space here gets wider to accommodate the subscript and superscript. I noticed that in my Internet Explorer browser, which is the touch version, it didn't do that. So you can basically change that with style sheets anyhow. But let's not get too long on that. So we have cite for citation. Now this gets confusing because we have citation, we have inline quote, and we have long quote. Basically, cite for a citation will go in italics, become italics. So you see already that we used to use I for italics. However, now we have extra semantic tags to indicate really what the italics mean. So we have a citation here. However, we have also an inline quote written with a Q tag. And figure me out the difference between cite and quote. Basically, the difference is presentational because cite inserts these quotation marks automatically. And I haven't done anything. If you look at my web page source, you see that when I wrote, Q, you see that there's no quotation mark here. However, they have been added in my default style sheet with this Q tag. So that's what it means. And then we go to blockquote. Now don't be confused. The other two quotes are inline. That means that they're part of a paragraph. However, blockquote creates its own sort of paragraph or block of text. And blockquote is for a long quote. I have my grammar book in front of me, but I forgot to really look into it. But there are rules that if your quotation gets longer than 2 lines, I believe, then you would use a block quote. And just to show you the result, it's rendered as such. So now, of course, I put a paragraph here, and this is an example of a block quote, and this is a new paragraph, and a new block quote. So block quotes are basically indented text. And you notice that here I just was using it as a demo of block quotes, but in reality I should have used a definition list instead. It hardly matters, but anyway. Our next tag is code, and code is just a way of saying that it's a source code in a programming language. Notice that what they say here, this element is best used for short code fragments because it does not preserve white space. What they are meaning here is that we have this pre-tag, which is a bit similar to the code tag, except that it preserves the indentation you put. So see, you see here that I indented my my paragraph in my pre-tag with these indentations. And of course you should know that if I indent it within anything else in HTML, it won't cause any difference because HTML automatically ignores the tabs. However, with pre, it won't ignore your spaces or your tabs. So that can be useful, but I would say I would use code and I would just apply good styles to make things indent and divisions and that sort of thing and margins. However, you can use pre, but I don't like it as much because it's not really made for HTML. It's kind of ignoring the HTML styles. Anyway, then we have variable, and here's another example of a semantic element favored over a presentational element because we could use italic. The only thing that happens with variable, I have my x and y surrounded by a var tag, which means variable. Here we go. And you notice that the only difference is that they're rendered in italics. But to the computer knows that these are variables and not just italic text. So it gives extra meaning. But of course, what extra meaning it gives is kind of to be known. I mean, I don't really know what difference it makes. For search engines, even search engines, who will search X and Y? I mean, does it prove that it's a math page? I don't really know. Anyway, and then we go to our sample text, and this logical element is used to indicate text that is a sample of what you would use for something. This principle is a bit weird, and even to me, I don't really understand it, but basically it gives the same rendering as your code tag will. So I've seen an example of it used as a header to an email. So if you want to give an example of something as a header to an email, or some other similar use, you could use sample text. And we have keyboard, and keyboard input is not very different from our two other, or actually four of these. Now we have code pre, and sample, and keyboard. They all use this monospaced font by default. And this indicates keyboard input, so you could use this when you're doing tutorials on a web page or something of the sort. You would want to bind this with style sheets and give its own font so that it's recognizable and all that. Okay, so once we've gone through keyboard, we can go through time. Now time is a bit weird, and you can read this. You can go see page 409 in my publication that I have. Sorry. Actually, it's this one. HTML and CSS, the complete reference. And they give examples of how datetime is used. But I don't really intend to explain it, and I won't really pretend that it's very important either. The only interesting thing I see is pub date, in which you would be able to define the publication date of even a paragraph or even a whole article or web page. So that's kind of interesting. And then we have our insert and delete. Well, notice concerning time, 250 is inside a time tag, and it doesn't have any styles applied to it. So time is really just for the computer to know, but it doesn't give any presentation. Of course, you could bind it with styles as you want. So yeah, we have insert and delete. Tell me if you see this used anywhere. I only see it as a possible style tag that you could use. But what it does is basically, when you use delete, well, you have the strike through, and when you have insert, you have an underline. So I guess you could use insert to replace the ancient U tag, but it doesn't really mean the same thing. It doesn't mean underlined text, but rather means text that has been inserted. Inserted or deleted. Anyway. And we have the horizontal rule. Now, I completely deprecate this for many reasons. And I don't think I'll have time to show you all that, but this is a horizontal rule. Now, first of all, I deprecate it because it's iGarbage. Really, you don't need this. You shouldn't use a horizontal rule to separate sections in your document. What you should use is rather spacing. Also, you can use CSS. Like, for example, if I go in my style tag, my style attribute. Sorry, wait a moment. Okay, sorry, that was my brother asking me something. So, as I was saying, you would add a style tag, and you could add a border bottom, and then we'll put that 2 pixels solid black. And as you see, this is going to basically replace your horizontal rule. Plus, you can make that occur at each time you have a new title or a new end paragraph, whatever. And finally, you have span. If all of these don't work for you, you can use a span and add your own styles, as I did here, and you can have any format you want. So that's our tutorial. That's how we use tags to indicate how we format text in HTML. And this is an overview of what we've seen. So now I just want to add a special message. You know, I don't want to force you to do this, but you can always do, what you see here, thumbs up. And also think of, well, this is ancient, but use this. Write a comment if you feel, please, and thank you. I'm a polite person, so I do use please and thank you. and I'm hoping to see you in our next tutorial.